Shabbat Shalom. A few weeks ago, I was asked to participate in a friend's wedding countdown. For those of you who are unaware, what this entails is a group of friends posting on social media a number symbolizing the number of days left until the wedding. So for instance, with 5 days left to wedding, 5 friends may post something relating to number 5. With 4 days left to the wedding, 4 friends will post something relating to number 4. And so on and so forth until we arrive at the wedding day. And participating in this countdown made me think of another count that we are currently participating in, Sefirat HaOmer. And I've been thinking the perennial question, the question that you may have had already since grade school. Why is it that Sefirat HaOmer involves us counting up towards 50 instead of the reverse of counting down? As any child in grade school can tell you, if you're anxiously awaiting an event, whether it be a birthday or summer vacation, you don't count up, but you count down. 3 weeks left, 2 weeks left, 3 days left, 1 day left, until you arrive to that momentous occasion. And so, if Sefirat HaOmer is meant to be a count towards Shavuot, why are we counting up instead of counting down? I further motivate this by pointing out that indeed the purpose of Sefirat HaOmer is primarily a count towards Shavuot. Whether you focus on the agricultural model, that Sefirat HaOmer is meant to represent the transition from the beginning of the harvest, as represented in Pesach when we offer a barley offering of Korban HaOmer, until we transition to the full harvest and we offer a offering of Shtei Alechem, of loaves of bread, or whether you focus on the historical transition as we move from a physical redemption as the Jews left Egypt to the spiritual redemption of Matan Torah, of the giving of the Torah. Either way, both of these models suggest that the purpose of the count, the reason we are engaged in this count of 50 days, is meant to count towards Shavuot. And so if we are counting towards Shavuot, why then are we counting up instead of counting down? I'd like to propose a suggestion based on the interpretation of Rabbi Ovadia Sforno. In his interpretation to Leviticus chapter 23, Sforno suggests that each holiday is meant to be a day dedicated to tefillah and korban, a day of prayer and thanks to God, a day where we are meant to think about all the things that God has granted us, all the things related to the season, and be thankful for the bounty that God has provided us. And the count that follows, the Sefirah, is meant to be a period of further reflection, where each day we are meant to think about all of the great things that God has continued to give us day in and day out. The count is not so much of focusing on the future, where we are counting towards something. Rather, the count is really meant to be a reflection of the past. We are thinking back of all the great things that God continually gives us, that He gave us during Pesach, and He keeps on giving us each and every day moving forward. And so today, for instance, the 19th day of the Omer, I am thankful about the things that God gave me on Pesach. And I'm remembering that today is the 19th day where those things, those blessings that God granted me on Pesach remain true. The 19th day of continued blessing. And so it makes sense then that I'm not counting down, because I'm not counting towards a purpose. I'm not counting towards the future. Rather, I'm counting up because I'm looking back to the past. I'm looking back to Pesach and the blessings that God granted me on Pesach, and remarking that each and every passing day, those blessings have continued. I'm reflecting on the past and how the past impacts and affects my present, and how I'm gracious to God for my present situation. There are some interesting halachic corollaries that emerge from this principle as well. In one halachic debate, the poskim debate whether or not a person can fulfill his obligation for Sefirat HaOmer by relying on the count of another. Everyone agrees that the principle of Shomea Ka'oneh, the halachic dictum stating that you're allowed to rely on another's blessing based on hearing it to fulfill your own, works for the blessing of Sefirat HaOmer. I can hear someone else make the bracha and thereby fulfill my own obligation to make my own bracha. But what about the count itself? Can I rely on someone else saying that today is the 19th day of the Omer to fulfill my obligation as well? The Magen Avram, in his commentary to the Shulchan Aruch, says no, you cannot. And the argument follows from what we've been saying, that if the purpose of Sefirat HaOmer is meant to be a reflection of gratitude to God, then just as when it comes to saying gratitude in Modim, in the prayer of thanks, in Shmona Esrei, where each of us must recite our own thanks, we cannot rely on the thanks given by the Shliach Tzibur, by the Chazan, so too, when it comes to Sefirat HaOmer, each of us must give our own thanks. You cannot rely on another's gratitude. Each of us must express our gratitude to God in our own way, using our own tongues, our own language for doing so. Likewise, in a similar debate, the Magen Avram posits that when it comes to counting Sefirat HaOmer, one cannot rely on the formulaic statement of Hebrew if one does not understand Hebrew. One must understand what one is saying. So if you don't understand Hebrew, you must use your vernacular, whatever language you understand, like English, in counting. Because the argument is the same. If point of Sefirat HaOmer is to be a form of gratitude, a thanks, then one cannot rely on formulaic statements of thanks. One must be genuine and heartfelt in one's thanks and gratitude. One must say something from the heart, something that one really believes, and cannot rely on a language that one does not understand in giving that thanks. This past year, I personally, and I presume many of us, have been undergoing a lot of counting down. For many of us, we've been thinking anxiously of a time when COVID will be finally over, when we finally can take off those annoying masks, when the hospitalization, the sickness, and the death leaves, when we can finally come back to our regular lives, to the way that life should work, and that the way we used to live our lives. And while I certainly do not in any way want to suggest any way of minimizing the real pain that people have felt through COVID, the real suffering that people have suffered through, I do believe that Sefirat HaOmer is a time for us to reflect on the benefits, the blessings that COVID may have provided us as well. That despite all its hardships, COVID may have provided certain hidden blessings. For some, that may manifest in increased family time or decreased commute times. It may mean that we have more time for our hobbies or for self-reflection and having a better sense of our inner personalities. Regardless of the particulars, there have been some blessings that COVID has brought for us. And while we are each counting down to when the vaccination rate is over 75%, 85%, we must also take Sefirat HaOmer as a model for gratitude for the things that God has granted us. To think not only about the future, but also to reflect on the past and the things that God in the present gives us. To think in the moment for what we can be thankful for, and not only focus all our energies on the future. And so today is the 19th day of Sefirat HaOmer. I pray that we are each blessed to continue counting and thanking God for many future days.